Welcome back to the Diary of a CMO, the podcast where I sit with CMOs and thought leaders in marketing and related media, tech, and creative industries. We'll talk about how they got to where they are, strategies and life lessons we can learn from them to help build a career, business, and ultimately a life that we love. I hope you enjoy. Please subscribe. Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining me on another episode of the Diary of a CMO. Today, I have an amazing guest, as always, on the podcast today to have some very exciting conversations with. I'm sure if you have been in the marketing communication space for a while, you will have come across this name. If you haven't met her in person, I'm sure you have seen the name somewhere on some keynotes, on some panel or the other. I'm really, really excited about this one. I have the privilege and honor to be speaking with Dr. Nkiru Olumide-Ojo. She is a seasoned corporate executive with over 20 years of experience driving the growth and management of multinational brands across key sectors, from financial services to aviation, telecommunications, oil and gas. Currently, she leads marketing, communications, and corporate social impact efforts for a financial services firm in South Africa. She's managing cross-border teams across Africa and offshore regions to deliver measurable results. Thank you very much for joining us today, Dr. Nkiru. Thank you so much. I'm so excited to have you on.
Hi, Itayo. True pleasure to be here. I haven't done a podcast in probably almost 2 years, so it's great to break. It's great to break the quiet, via
Fantastic. My heart just
yours.
leapt for joy to know that I'm the one. Yeah. We've been trying to do this for a few months now. I know you have a very busy
Yeah.
schedule, so I don't take it lightly at all that you have made out time to do this. So thank you very much. I typically like to start the pod by saying that, for those who are meeting you for the first time, um, how would
Mhm.
you like to introduce yourself in terms of like your professional journey to where you are today?
I think that I'm allowed to be, a bit dramatic and even expressive because I feel like the past 4 years have been focused on evolving. So I think the new way for which I will describe myself is a multi-passionate, individual. I've obviously spent a really long time looking after marketing and communication, building brands, across the continent and now internationally with a few offshore markets. So I think multi-passionate would be where I'll hinge my hat on, more than all the hardcore practical
Interesting.
experience, that my resume does talk about.
Multi-passionate. Interesting. Um, I
Mm-hmm.
have a thing for when people describe themselves in like these very short phrases. I have
Mm-hmm.
and I like to reference people like Kensani Nobanda at NetBank who would have
Right.
what's it called? She calls herself the brand maverick, and I have a few other people like that who have those things.
Right.
I'm looking at your profile and I see impact storyteller.
Oh
What does that
yes.
mean?
Yes. Yes. So I think for a while, and I've been blessed to have experience from both angles. And what I call both angles is, it's not all the time you find people who have experiences from marketing and communication. You typically find people have powerful strength in either. And I think at some point I said to myself, which is a hat you prefer the most? And look, whether marketing or communication or even corporate social impact, what is it, that you want to say? And I think at each point, with each of those pillars, I want to tell
Right,
the story of the impact
right.
that is being made, whether it's in selling a product, is in selling a service, or is in, delivering some social development initiative. And that's how I came about with saying, actually, having considered everything else, I'm actually an impact storyteller.
Wow. Interesting. That sounds really exciting. Sounds very exciting. I can't help but wonder, like, in your current role where you have to look after multiple markets,
Mm-hmm,
I always like to ask the question, how do you manage,
mm-hmm,
like, having to navigate this
mm-hmm,
different cultures, languages, economies, especially
mm-hmm,
from the point of
mm-hmm,
view of tailoring your communication strategy or messaging in a way that resonates with your brand,
mm-hmm,
or resonates with the different markets,
mm-hmm,
but still stays true to the brand. How do
mm-hmm.
you manage? How do you navigate that?
Right. I mean, I think I have had an exciting last few years, just looking after the brand for the organization that I work for
Right.
across markets. And I think I say it very lightly because I've had an exciting few years. I'm very peoply, which means that I quite like
Peoply.
people. People translate
Wow.
that immediately, yes, to say you're extroverted. And I don't
Okay.
always think so. But I love people, love being in the midst of people. So I think what this has exposed me to is to more people. What it has exposed me to is to more culture. And, I sit down sometimes giggling and laughing about how oftentimes as Africans, we make quite a fuss about how different we are, but in a lot of ways, we are similar. Having said that, I think to answer your question even more directly is that understanding, being culturally aware is a very huge skill, that would help you as an individual, but also help the brand that you're looking after to have the right outcomes. What do I mean by that? I feel like culture is the one thing that allows you get
Interesting.
past the gate, and it's understanding, whether it's from the little nuances of understanding how people greet, understanding how people connect. I remember going into a country, and fortunately the person, because typically when I go into a country I'll go off to see the chief executive first, and then he was someone who, and I think I'm giving out the country now, he was a Nigerian who was looking after this brand in this organization in a Portuguese market. And he said to me, I just want to tell you, because I'm Nigerian, and he speaks amazing Portuguese, has always lived, in this country. And he said to me, I think I want to tell you that the people here are very hearts and mindish. And so I'm telling you not to be too matter of factly. So don't go in there and get on with it. Even if you don't know their family, you have to say, how are you? How's your family doing? Is all going good, before you latching. And someone else might say, oh, but that's a basic. I don't think so. Not a lot of people are, I mean, you find people who aren't interested in the soft, pieces, who want to go straight in. And then the piece about maintaining your brand identity, I think the essence of who you are remains as the brand. But I think when you land in market, you land in a way that takes in the cultural nuances and help the people feel like you are part of their story or part of who they are. I make it obviously sound very simple, but there are lots of steps, to take in
Yeah.
between.
In doing this and in accomplishing this objective of cutting across,
Mm-hmm,
is there any moment that comes to mind? Because we talk about successes a lot. Not many of us are comfortable about talking about where we probably got it wrong. I'm just
mm-hmm.
curious to know, like, does
Yeah.
anything come to mind in terms of one of the missteps, maybe personal or one you witnessed in terms of
Mm,
navigating cultures and how you kind
mm,
of
mm,
built from there?
mm, mm. So, I mean, I'm actually never shy about talking about my
Appreciate
failures. I
that.
think that, helps me remember, where I journeyed from. So there were two incidences. I think I'd worked on, we were going on a business trip and into a country that's deeply cultural. And I kind of watched everyone, and, I was watching attentively, but for some reason I still missed it. And the people, of the country would reach out their hands to you, and then you take the hands with both hands, to shake the hands you receive, with both hands. And I thought that I was paying all the attention that I could. But somehow when it got to me, he reached out his hands and I only reached out my right hand. And they kind of thought it was quite casual, and they mentioned it to the senior executive who I was traveling with. And I was full of apologies because I thought, I was watching carefully and I thought I had read prior. But somehow when it came to the actual action, I put out my right hand. And I think also when I moved, into South Africa, I was looking at after a piece of our business. Again, that was deeply cultural. And I remember, it seemed like a very tiny, mini communication. And we were going to do, I don't remember what it was, but it was either a cultural day ad or something, or a national day ad. And I remember them coming to me to say, oh, we had a situation, we're not sure, is it a national day or is it an independence day? So I said, just check, guys, just Google and check. I think I should have paid a lot more attention to details. And what happened was it wasn't independence, it was a national day. And that's a big deal because they wrote back from the embassy saying we were not colonized by anyone, so we were not getting independence, and most especially used an X type of flower, which is synonymous with this country, versus this time. I'm like, oh my goodness, I apologize unreservedly. I think what that taught me really, because it's good to get lessons from failing, is, it's not enough to pay attention to details. You need to get under the details,
Right.
like literally put the details above, get under it and be sure before signing off, and going
That's
to
an
market.
incredible story. Thank you so much for sharing that. I really appreciate it. So back to this, title of impact storyteller. And my
Yes.
as I think about it, I see that there's a lot of
Mhm.
brands, whether locally or let's speak about the continent now, who do a lot of good work from a social
Mhm.
impact standpoint.
Right.
But the challenge usually is how they sort of blend that into the classic marketing comms. Um, so
Mhm.
you'd find that I had the privilege of sitting in a client meeting a few years ago. A client whose
Mhm.
brand, the main thing they will do is social impact. Like they're not your typical,
Right.
gymnastics with marketing and stuff like that. They focus on
Mhm.
impact. And the challenge really was, how do we tell stories about the things we are doing as a brand
Mhm.
from a social
Mhm.
impact standpoint, especially in a way
Mhm.
that drives, like you said, in like your profile reads, that drives results. What are
Mhm.
some of those sort of
Mhm.
nuance or one or two things that you'd advise marketing leaders
Mhm.
or CMOs to pay attention to in an attempt
Mhm.
to tell meaningful stories based on whatever they do from a social
Mhm.
impact standpoint in a way that drives overall or
Mhm.
measurable results?
Thanks, Aitayo. I think the first thing is to be able to differentiate between the output and the outcome. And I think this is where we have all of those issues where we want to say we gave, I don't know, we built 6 classrooms, for this underserved school. But that's great. That is the output and that's good. But what is the outcome, of that? Are you saying that because of these 5 classrooms that you handed over, they had better matric results, which by the way is the same thing as WAEC results, back in Nigeria, that people have, more A's, did attention span increase, was the actual outcome? What is the actual outcome? So I think the first principle is to separate output from outcome. I think that's really important. And I think a lot of brands do the talking themselves. And I think that the stories are better told from, and from the person who has experienced it. And it makes the story more powerful. So if this young girl, we put the microphone before her and she tells the genuine truth of sitting under a tree, and
Yeah.
now I'm being dramatic, sitting under a tree prior. But since this came, her uniforms are less wet. Her books are intact, in her bag. She also gets a meal. What that does or has done for her is her outcomes are better and she has 3 C's versus when she'll have 3 P's. I think those are the powerful outcomes that, we miss telling. And I think the third thing that I'm going to put out is really just the knowing what story to tell the different audience.
Right.
And let me explain that. I think that every time they speak to people about telling the story of the impact that they make, people just think in a linear form, but there are different audiences. And I think if you are talking about impact that you've made and you are thinking about an economist, I think that what he's going to be thinking about to be completely different if you were talking to a lifestyle journalist who obviously would be interested in the details at giving of, oh, her school uniform is no longer wet. Oh, she now has a bag. Or, oh, versus economists who will be saying, oh, they're giving 5 million rands or 5 million naira. And okay, I think for 4Cs from 50 people, the cost per person is 2,000 rands. That's not
Yeah.
bad. You know what I mean? So I think even with those outcomes you have, you've got to dimension them and be able to tell different stories to appeal to different
Oh
stakeholders.
boy. Oh my goodness.
Mm,
I want to talk to you about brand reputation because obviously social impact
right.
to a large extent has a direct impact
Mm-hmm,
on that. No pun intended. Um,
mm-hmm,
is that in today's world, especially with the digital age and the digital platforms, social
right.
media specifically, it becomes very
Mm-hmm,
interesting
mm-hmm,
and tricky to manage or
mm-hmm.
maintain, enhance brand reputation. What would be your key recommendations, or what are your key strategies when it comes to, especially within your experience, strategies you have found to be very effective, especially in today's world, in really
Mm-hmm.
maintaining and driving brand reputation?
Hmm. Right. So I think a few of the obvious, which is starting with the end in mind, which is, what is the
Mm,
objective, for building the reputation? And I mean, it might sound ordinary, but am I building my brand reputation because I ultimately want to list in the Johannesburg Stock Exchange, or I ultimately want to list in New York Stock Exchange, or I want to get investors, or, what is my purpose for trying to build, a brand reputation? I think it's so important, to be
mm,
clear about that, because what that does for you is it helps you align, your
mm,
strategies. And I think if we do have a lot of brand owners here, I think don't fall into the trap of thinking that brand building is synonymous with social media usage. Social media is only a channel, for
mm,
expressing your brand after you have drawn up the
mm.
strategy. So I think it's a simple case of understanding what your objective is, understanding who your target audience is, thinking about how you dimension them, and having a strategy, for connecting to them. I think the other piece is doing so
Consistency.
consistently, because that's
Mm,
so important. And then I think also just ensuring, because you find people who spend a lot of money for channels marketing, trying to build their reputation, but the actual alignment when the brand is being experienced between the brand promise, and the actual
right.
experience is broken. So I think, ensure that your brand experience aligns with all of the stories and all of the
Mm,
promises that you're talking about. I remember, working on a brand, many years ago, and we had just put out, product without, just being tight on the experience. And someone just wrote on Twitter, to say, I actually think people are very stupid. From you, the founder, to the last person, you're actually very stupid because you just wasted my time, based on he or she's trial of the product. So I think ensure that your client experience is great, and then deploy all of these channels. I think the last and really important piece that I'd like to put forward is people place a lot of and pay a lot of investment into building a brand reputation, but they don't focus a lot on
mm,
safeguarding it. And what do I mean? I think is making the right investment in crisis management, ensuring that you have a fat business continuity plan so that, because this is
absolutely.
real life, so that if the product goes bust, something, happens, there's that and that's why you find people, they're called bottoms up brands, and they're thinking, oh my goodness, it takes them time to respond. People don't even have holding statements when these sorts of things happen, and then they rely on social media to put out things that weren't well articulated. So I think the last piece would be invest a lot of time building a crisis management, crisis communication tool. I think that would be
I
valuable, in
I'm
helping
so
you
glad you
build.
touched on
Yeah.
crisis management, because to be honest, that's going to be
Hmm.
my next question. Absolutely, because I mean,
Right.
again, you can't talk about brand reputation without talking about crisis management. Yeah, and
No, you
there's a
can't.
particular case study that comes to mind, and it's one of the major telcos on the
Hmm.
continent. Very recently,
Right.
had a price increase
Hmm.
on one of their, I think it was a data
Hmm.
bundle or something, and in an attempt
Right.
to sort of make light, I mean, from their perspective, make light of the increase, they decided to put out a love
Hmm.
letter, because this
Hmm.
communication piece was published, I think it was around Valentine's
Hmm.
Day or so. So the
Hmm.
tone, the messaging, everything of that letter,
Hmm.
um, based on the way it was received, and I'm judging by the comments
Hmm.
and all of the conversations I saw when they put that out, it
Hmm.
clearly didn't land well. In fact, people got so upset, thinking that, guys, you
Hmm.
literally increased prices in a very tough times, for a lot of your consumers, and then now you have the audacity to
Hmm.
send out, to post this thing that is in the form of a love letter,
Right.
that almost make light of the
Hmm.
fact that you are only increasing our burden, and it just went very, very left.
Hmm.
And unfortunately, I assume that the telco maybe did some kind of a crisis management or crisis or communication or whatever afterwards.
Hmm.
Unfortunately, I didn't get to see that, even though I saw the thing that went wrong, which is usually the thing, bad news travels faster
Right.
or something like that. So my
Hmm.
question is, like, what would be your recommendation, to brands? If possible, we can use this particular
Hmm.
telco case study, where they've
Hmm.
increased prices. I mean, sometimes, I mean, it's inevitable, especially with the current realities of the economy and in terms of their own sort of everything that goes into doing the business that they do. What would be your recommendation when brands
Hmm.
find themselves in this sort of hot mess? Like, is there? Do you have like a playbook? Obviously, it will vary from brand to
Hmm.
brand, but what would be some of the core
Hmm.
principles that you'd advise brand owners, CMOs,
Hmm.
to kind of pay attention to when it comes to
Hmm.
conversations around crisis?
So I mean, I saw that really briefly, and I didn't think that it fell flat on its face. But then again, you know how these things are. Perhaps when I got online and eventually got in touch with what was happening, maybe they
Right.
had come round, maybe it was the beginning, maybe it was the platform that I read, but I didn't think that it fell flat on its face. I thought that it was, I mean, a
Yeah, it
nice
was obviously an attempt to be
attempt at
lighted, to be
ingenuity.
lighthearted about it.
Yes,
But
I thought so.
unfortunately, if you look at
I thought so.
the thread, it was a very long thread with a
Right,
bunch of comments, which even makes this our case study more interesting,
right.
right? From the point of view where the brand
Hmm.
feels like they have checked all the boxes, but yet this thing seems to be
Hmm.
getting the wrong reception from the audience. How do you navigate that as a brand owner?
Hmm. Mm. I mean, I think even in prepping for the ingenious approach, I think it's so important to map all the scenarios, which is almost having like a risk analysis. If it's well received,
If
what
this, then
happens to
that.
us? If it's not well received, what would we do? If it's this, then we do that. If it's that,
Mm.
then we do this. I think, I mean, and then I suppose you just keep listening to the social sentiments and seeing, what it is, at the time, or what the social sentiments are. And if they're going from negative to positive or positive to negative, which I suppose so many listening tools, can do for you. I think the reality is sometimes you get into a situation where you almost cannot
Mm,
get it right. And and why do I say that? Maybe the economic environment eh, is
mm,
more pressing, and it didn't matter, sometimes you can even do a freebie and not
right.
get it right because of the larger environment. So I don't know, that I have the magic wand
Right.
for what they did, but I do know that one, I thought it's
Mm,
ingenious. I don't know what the ultimate social
right.
sentiments were for them, but I do hope that they mapped out, all the scenarios and were able to react. I think at some point I lost track of what
Interesting.
was
So I
going
think
on.
one of the major things I could take from you is this sort of scenario planning when we have to, I like the
Correct.
point you made earlier about like having like a holding statement, obviously without sounding
Mm-hmm.
robotic. Sometimes these holding statements can then become robotic.
Yes.
And just kind of looking at
Mm-hmm.
those two tools as a way to sort of manage that. I saw that you were
Mm-hmm.
on the one of the jury for the Lions, Cannes Lions.
Oh,
I think it was
yeah.
the
Yes.
SDG one. I'm just curious,
Mm-hmm.
because part of the thing I like to talk about on the podcast is, you know, Africa's reputation, across the rest of the
Mm-hmm.
world. And I'm curious to get a sense from
Mm-hmm.
you based on the entries you looked at and the things that you saw as being a part of that jury. How is Africa
Mm-hmm.
faring, when it comes to those kinds of, campaigns or projects, in terms of SDG specifically? How is Africa faring? What can we
Mm-hmm.
do better? And all in all, what that
Mm-hmm.
experience was like for you?
Mm. So I think Africa has a lot of potential, very high
Mm,
creativity. I mean, I really was looking at the things and I'm thinking, but I know this. Oh, but we have this. Oh, but I've seen this. Oh, they do have this
oh
in
wow.
Mozambique. Hey, not a big deal. Oh, no, we've seen that before. So I think there's no death of creativity. I think that we really are, creative. I think that there were a few places that I thought we could
Mm,
have improved, and which is one, putting yourself
right.
forward. I think, just having a lot more
Got
African
it.
entries could have been great. And I think we can hold a lot of things
Mm,
responsible for that. I think the second thing being on that jury was how similar the issues, because people like to shine the light, on
right.
the continent, and post all of our problems. Well, guess what? I saw lots of entries from South America that were trying to solve, social issues that were not dissimilar to the social issues we
Right.
face on the continent. So I think what that said to me is we are not putting the bright side of ourselves out deliberately enough. So I might have seen something that was solving for water issues. And I'm thinking, you mean that you have these type of water issues and we're discussing borehole? Who would have thought? You just kind of think that those are the preserves, those challenges are the
Right.
preserves of the continent. So I think the point I'm making is the issues we face are not dissimilar. There are lots of those types of issues, but I'm not sure why those issues have become the signature issues
Right.
of the continent. So I'm not sure how we have been unwittingly positioned that the people who
Right.
own the
Yeah.
issues, if you know
Yeah.
what I mean. So these issues are common. How was my experience? I absolutely loved it. Absolutely enjoyed it. I love debates and I love, to hear superior arguments. And sometimes you put forth your argument and you're thinking, oh my goodness, that was so cool. I was so good. I'm actually quite hot. My thoughts are very powerful. And then someone puts theirs out, you're thinking, oh my word, I didn't think of that angle. Oh no, actually,
Oh
his
my
is more
god.
powerful. And then you're looking at him and thinking, ah, this guy's so cool from Colin. He's very sharp. By the way, what's in his resume again? Another person puts forth, and you're like, damn it, this panel is. So I think the point is, what it does for you is the monopoly of
Mm,
great ideas is not with
absolutely.
anyone. There are many intellectual people. I think one of the discoveries I made was, if you really, it's easy to mouth and say, oh, no, 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 I'll bow to the superior argument, when your voice is, maybe you are the leader in your sector and your voice always the loudest. But it takes humility to say, that was a more
Absolutely.
powerful argument. I put down mine totally, completely. And I go, in fact, at some point we were voting, and I'll be like, hey, God, should I stand by this? And I'm like, but why are you standing? That argument is not powerful. There's no need to stand, abandon it, move. So there's also a bit of
Yeah.
humility, but I loved gleaning from the eyes of other people, like completely loved the
Interesting.
exposure. And it's an experience I was so grateful
Interesting.
for.
Interesting.
With
Speaking of
sushi.
learning, I guess congratulations are still in
Mhm.
order for your PhD. So congratulations
Thank you.
on such an
Thank
amazing
you.
accomplishment. I
Thank you. And glory
Yes,
to
so glory to
Jesus.
Jesus.
Mhm.
I couldn't help but to obviously in kind of prepping for this
Yeah.
podcast, just checking it out, and
Hmm.
I saw one of your posts where you referenced having six of your people in the room, and then it sounds like you had 1,000 people.
Yes,
Yeah, tell
indeed.
me about that
Yes,
experience
indeed.
because I know
Yes,
that
indeed.
it couldn't have been easy at all. It
Yeah.
couldn't have been easy at all. And I'm just
Mm,
curious, and I'd like to talk about these kinds of things
mm,
for those who are listening because believe it or not,
mm.
Dr. Nkiru, there are people who look at you and think, oh man, she's a superwoman. She has it all covered. Oh, absolutely.
Really?
Absolutely. I'm
Oh,
telling you, if only they knew, Abby. So please tell them.
doesn't what
Please
if
tell
only they
them.
knew. Okay, so I'll tell them. I think before I tell them, I'm going to
Okay.
tell you a story. I had a chief executive officer that I completely admired. She is female, or was female, because she's no longer my chief executive. And at the time, because I really admired her, and when I admire you, I really think you came from heaven. And, people would want to talk to her and they'll have to come through me, for panels and things. And I tell her, I've put together this very high level panel. You're going to speak. Then she gets there and she says to them, excuse me, they'll say, what? I just want to say that if I can be the chief executive, then any of you here can. I'm like, but I didn't gather these people for you to ordinarize, the position. But when I was doing my PhD, that's what came to my mind. And I said, if I can actually do it, then I dare say anyone else can. So come through. I started with a thought during COVID. I was like, what's happening with this COVID? Where's the world going? What must I do now? Things were slower. So I thought, you know what? Let me do a PhD. And then I started. And you know how you start with, you have to write a proposal. You start with very highfalutin ideas, big thoughts, big ideas. And the school that I went to, VITS, it can be reputationally difficult because, with other people, you start and then in the end, you have to defend. They feel like they don't want to waste their time. So you have to tell them why this is PhD worthy. So what that did for me was I had to do my proposal, and then they have an internal defense and external defense from the beginning. I just found it to be an incredibly humbling experience. If you had no humility in life, just come through with, to do a PhD, you would learn some humility. I found it incredibly, incredibly humbling. And I remember the first session we had, after we had finished defenses and we were admitted, and it was our onboarding period. And it was actually my supervisor who, so reminded me about this experience. So we were all on the call because it was still post COVID. So we were still working remotely. And then she said to me, and then I said to them, we had everyone come on the call, and then they said, oh, my name is blah, blah, blah. I'm doing blockchain something, something. My name is blah, blah, blah. I'm doing blah, 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 blah. And then when it got to me, I said, after listening to all of you, my name is Nkiru Olumide-Ojo. I'm doing X and X. And to be honest, I don't know how I'm in your midst. You don't know. And everyone crackled up, but that's how I felt. I don't know that there was any step or any stage or phase where I was incredibly confident. I think that in a lot of the phases and the spaces, I was unsure. But I think also that, and this is why I say it's by God's grace, God never leaves you without, help, support, or inspiration. I met, and that's again where I talk about humility. I met someone who is young. Met her in the first day of our internal defense, and everyone says that the PhD journey is lonely, but I journeyed with her and journeyed with a few, other persons. We formed a group called Academic Spaces. We met every other Saturday, especially when I was in town, and it didn't have to be people who were in VITS. We had people who were doing PhD from everywhere. And that support group helped because they were giving you, helplines, details, down to the nitty gritties. And that's how, the journey came through. So I think maybe just a few lessons. I think the first lesson is just do it, get started. If you want to do it, I think get started. And I want to give you one of my cheat theories. And one of my cheap theories is don't try to solve big problems, and I think just keep it simple. When I started out, I wanted to do two markets, Anglophone, Francophone, all sorts of big things. Eventually I came down, as I said to myself, I came down from, the high horse. And then I wanted to do mixed methodology. I had actually started, and for some reason, following my master's, I kind of thought, I don't know where I got the impression that qualitative was better, but I ended up doing, quantitative. I give all of these guides to say, one, it is possible. I think just get started. I think two, in case I'm making it sound really glossy, it is hectic. I mean, as an example, I organically grew a podcast I ran, the podcast of the working girls. I grew it to 13,000 listeners organically, no promotion, nothing. But I had to drop it because I think at some point I realized I couldn't go to source speakers. I just didn't have the bandwidth, And I think a few times I would be joyous, like I would be in a party dancing or happy, and then the voice will come to you to say, "You are dancing, Ngbo, you are dancing, you are dancing when you have work, that hasn't been submitted." So I think that was it, and that was the journey. And I think just very lastly, I don't say the grace of God as a cliche. I say it because there were many times. I remember writing one of my chapters from November till, was it February? I just wrote it forever, you know? And a lot of times I prayed, I'd be like, actually, God, today I have no idea what I'm writing. Absolutely no idea. Can you please just help me? And from being quiet, concentrating, come through, and then I'm able to write it. So when I say by God's grace, it is absolutely not a cliche.
All right. I was going to ask about the Lighthouse Network. This
Yeah,
is something I definitely think we should talk about. Um,
yes.
I, by the way, one of your daughters who works closely with you on Lighthouse is someone who is a
Right.
friend, as well.
Oh,
so
okay.
so I'd known of the Lighthouse, what you're doing with the Lighthouse
Right.
for a while now. I also took a look at the passionate clip by Mrs. Adenike Ogunlesi.
All
Um,
right.
yeah, and I just would like to kind of hear from you. On the
Right.
last episodes I had recently, I talked to one of my guests as well on some of the impact projects that we're doing, especially projects that are targeted at women as well. So please talk to us about what you're doing with the Lighthouse Network, why you are doing
Mhm,
it, and what's driving you.
mhm. Right. So the Lighthouse Network, I have been doing work, two pieces of work under it for years. I think we started in 2014, and it's really around marketplace readiness for I've had two segments of audience. The first has been women, and that really was born out of the struggles I had had. You know, I kind of felt, oh, I wasn't quite prepared for the workplace. I kind of had lots of knocks. Maybe if I had, you know, a bit of mentorship, structured mentorship, things might have been okay. I think the second piece was also just going to underserved schools to help youths get ready for the marketplace. You would find that a few youths just arrive in the marketplace, and the people who were prepared, deliberately prepared for the marketplace, do a lot better. And what does preparation look like? Sometimes it looks like something as tiny weeny as how to interview, how to fix your resume, just everything that helps you, you know, get ready for that marketplace. So I had a team of volunteers. Some of them are lawyers who will come tell you how to set up a business, because we have to know that the formal employment sector may not take everyone, and there are people who are interested in being entrepreneurs. So that's how we have run the Lighthouse Network for years.
Interesting.
We did have a few support, one or two sponsorships, you know, here and there, but it has been over the years self-funded. And I think what I did pre-COVID, we were quite active. Post-COVID, we were not as active. And I thought, what can I do with this, you know, to make it further reaching? And that's when I had the book on marketplace readiness and had Mr. Denike Gunlesi. I did have quite an array of people who are 9 to 5ers
Right.
and people who are entrepreneurs. And that's when her passion, you know, in talking about how tough the marketplace is, got us that viral video.
Amazing, amazing, incredible. In your experience in mentoring like young working women, what are some of the challenges you find? Again, this might just be you telling me your journey as well,
Mhm,
because I'm sure
mhm,
their experiences might not be too different from yours. But what are some of the
mhm,
common challenges you find
mhm,
for young women when it comes to like corporate sector or building a
mhm,
career or and so on and so forth, and how do you guide them? What are some of the recommendations? Just
mhm,
a minute or two for those who might not have the
mhm,
opportunity to be a part of the program. What would be those nuggets you could give them in terms of
mhm,
navigating those challenges?
mhm. I mean, I think having done this for a long time now, what I find is a lot of people are lacking in self-awareness,
Mm,
and you would have thought, you know, that a lot more people would have been equipped with the knowledge of themselves. So the people who don't know their temperaments, don't know how to react in situations, and then just get into the marketplace. What that means is you are just roughing it, you know, as you go along. Whereas if you had, you know, self-awareness, you know, you'd understand how to dial up yourself, dial down
right,
yourself, you
right,
know, what
right.
foot to put forward to help you make career advancement. So I think that would be the short response.
Interesting. Just being self-aware and knowing yourself as
So
much as possible.
important.
Interesting.
So important.
Interesting. Um, I I think that I think you have a thing for quotes. When I look at some of the things you put out, and this is one I saw and I really liked. We do not
Mhm.
learn from experience; we learn from reflecting on experience.
Correct.
Yeah, very
Right.
self-explanatory. But
Mhm.
I'm curious: is this from a personal experience, pun intended?
Oh, I mean, yes, indeed it is. Because some experiences that I had that I didn't reflect on, sometimes the messages were lost on me.
Hmm,
And when the messages are lost, if they were erroneous experiences, then I was bound to repeating them again.
right.
So there's a place for saying, how did I cross that big river? I mean, I crossed the river great. I definitely know how to cross it. But, you know, what were the details of the crossing? Could I have done anything? Could I just have used a raft? Oh, I crossed successfully, you know, walking physically across the bridge. Maybe next time I'll hire a raft, you know, and that's what
Interesting.
reflection
Right.
does for you. It causes you to go a level deeper, you
Right.
know, actually it causes you to go under the details,
Right.
you know, as I had said, you
Earlier
know,
on.
earlier,
Mm,
and helps you with better outcomes.
interesting. You've had You've had a great career. I mean, from my point of view, you might
No,
feel
thank
different.
God.
You might feel differently.
Glory to Jesus.
But from my point of view, I think you've had an amazing career. I cannot help but ask, how do you integrate life, like they say, work-life integration? Someone has said it's not work-life balance, it's work-life integration. How have you been able
Hmm.
to manage having such a demanding career with family
Hmm.
life? Not to mention then adding,
Hmm.
a PhD program onto that as well.
Hmm. Hmm. So I think being honest with myself has helped me on my journey.
Mm,
And I think the understanding that life is in
mm,
phases. I think some phases are more aggressive and more hectic than the others.
mm.
And it gets better. I mean, I say to people, I think when I started carrying baby bags, nothing, I just felt, oh God, I'll constantly be carrying these baby bags. I always never go out without wondering if I had another diaper or another extra food or something. But that phase, you get past that phase.
Right, right.
So I think the phases become easier, but I
Mm,
think generally a rule of thumb has been to understand because people say you juggle all the bottles. Even when you juggle bottles, bottles fall, and
absolutely,
bottles break. So I think
absolutely.
is, making sure that the bottles that you are juggling that may potentially fall are not irreparable.
Mm,
So, bottles of family. And then, just knowing what to cut off. I think when my life was fast paced, I realized that I could be a great mother, a great wife, a great many things, or perhaps I wouldn't be able to be a great friend, which means that I wouldn't necessarily show
mm,
up
mm,
all the time for the
mm,
parties and the
mm,
funerals because
mm.
that's just and I really had, I mean, I'd look at my pictures now, I'd be like, God, my Lord, look at your
Wow,
eyes,
wow, wow.
tired. And so I think people, everyone should be comforted that life is in phases. I
Right.
mean, I know that the different phases would bring different issues, but you would at least outgrow some phases and then graduates, as they say, onto the next phase. So I think balance, in my view, is still a myth.
Right.
I
Right.
think sometimes it will be 60-40, sometimes it will be 70-30, sometimes it will be 55-54. I
Right.
don't know that it's ever 50-50 though. And this is my
Right.
lived
Right.
experience, might be
Right.
different from another
Right.
person's.
Right. Right. I think I once saw a viral clip actually of a woman who said exactly what you just said,
Mm-hmm.
about how you know bringing like being being 50-50 in, like it's not, and she was talking about it from the context of a married couple, right?
Mm-hmm.
That and sometimes the man will be 70% in and doing and being more present and being more, sometimes it might be won't be the wife, it might be. So I can see how even professionally and in terms of family and other aspects of life, the waiting might vary from time to time. I've got two more questions as we start to wind down. The first one
Mm-hmm.
is when you think about communications, corporate communications, and how it has evolved over decades.
Mm-hmm.
What would be your advice for marketing leaders or CMOs, or people who are driving communications for brands? What
Mm-hmm.
would be the things you would ask them to pay attention to? Maybe just two or three things that you'd think, in the near future or in the foreseeable
Mm-hmm.
future, these things will become very, very critical and you have to pay
Mm-hmm.
attention to them.
Mm-hmm. Right. I think the way that you tell your story is
Mm,
so important.
right.
And by that I mean the methodology or the approach.
Mm, mm,
I mean there's that proverb that says that until the lion tells a story, everyone would think that the cheetah is the most powerful animal, in the jungle. I mean, those are not the exact
yeah, I get what you're
animals,
saying.
but a lot of brands I've worked in over time would tell their stories in a shy manner. And what you would find is people who have less accomplishments will come and posture like they were the kings. And you're thinking, no, but he's not. He doesn't even have the data to back that. But you didn't, fill up the gap and tell your story. So I think it's the way that you tell your story. Tell it simply, tell it with great confidence, I think the second piece is, and I'm so glad that has reduced. But when I started out and I had made the point of having both experiences, corporate communications was seen as the poorer cousin. But I'm glad that that has, changed.
Yeah,
I
yeah,
think the second thing I would say, in that regard would be measure. I think with marketing is easier because we can gauge the tangibles, which is we can see how much of the product
yeah,
sold, we can
yeah,
see the
yeah,
uptake, we can
yeah.
see the. But I think when we move over to peer, I think my point is there's just so many measurement tools, these days that would allow you measure
Right.
to see what your outputs and your outcomes are.
Yeah.
So I think the third piece would be don't be deceived by the lure or maybe the array of information on social media. I don't think that that is knowledge.
Mm,
I think that when you deliberately train your team, then they can mine some knowledge out of that information. So don't recruit them and say, oh, there's a lot of information available everywhere. You're good to go. I
right.
think I can sit in a meeting and tell the one who's just been recruited to fill in a gap versus the one who's really skilled and knowledgeable about that. So if you are not getting trained, please train yourself, invest in yourself to learn.
Interesting. Thank you very much. Thank you so much, Dr. Nkiru. My final question is, which is the one I like to end with. It's a two-part question. What if you're not building brands and telling impact stories and all of these
Mhm.
exciting things with work, what do you do to sort of just relax and put your feet up if you ever do? And
Mm.
also, what would you say to 15-year-old Nkiru?
Mm. I mean, I think I'll be doing a lot of things, and I mean, I ran a podcast with a working girl. I think I would have evolved onto another because I think that there's power in people sharing their stories and people
Absolutely,
listening and learning.
absolutely.
Even worse now, attention span is so low, so
Mm,
sharing knowledge audibly or by video is much more accepting. So I love conversations. So I'm constantly having conversations in WhatsApp groups or real conversations with my friends.
interesting.
When I'm in Lagos, I love going out. So I'm going to, and,
Yeah,
and it's not my fault. There's always something to do. There's always
yeah,
some
yeah,
wedding, funeral,
yeah,
something.
yeah.
My friends in Joburg will say to me, what's your average weekend like? I'm like, oh, but I've got one party and I've got, they're like, no hiking. I'm like, that's our hiking. We're
What?
hiking inside the parties. So I think go out with friends and family to parties or just hanging with my husband, to be honest.
Interesting. And then
It's also
15-year-old
part of
Nkiru,
it.
what would you say to her?
Oh, my 15, I really resent the fact that my audacity was curtailed. I think my 15-year-old self would have been, don't let anyone curtail your audacity. Fire on. The world will make adjustments.
You know that thing that they do when you say something and they snap their fingers.
No, 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 no. It's all that. Oh no, you don't talk like that. Oh no, you don't do. Oh no, that's not how. No, 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 no. I would say to her, keep going. I've seen the world adjust to people who
Wow,
are,
wow,
worse than my 15-year-old self. So I
wow,
really should have
wow.
kept that fire and fieriness going.
Wow, wow. Thank you so much. It's interesting, and
True
I think this is
pleasure.
very common with a lot of women in like senior leadership. I
Mm-hmm.
guarantee you, I asked Kenzie the same question.
Right.
She talked about this. She described
Oh
it as
really?
hers was more of ambition. Like she would
Hmm.
have been should have pushed herself a lot more in terms of being more ambitious. I asked Don Rowlands, Densu, CEO for Sub-Saharan Africa, same thing. I asked Zizwe, who is the head of marketing for Safaricom, same thing. Like
Mm-hmm.
it's this on
Are you for
I'm
real?
telling you, this uninhibited, sort of forget everything else. Just keep doing you, keep pressing forward, keep doing what you're doing. Like And I feel like a lot more, just for the sake of this conversation, a lot more young women, because I think that for men, we kind of expect to be heard, we kind of expect to have our way or whatever. So I think it's definitely a truth that every young girl on the continent of Africa and the rest of the world should hear. And I hope that they do, so that we have a lot more audacious women, a lot more, fiery, women, because we know we need them. We need them. We need them. Thank you so much, Dr. Nkiru. Thank you so much for your
True
time. I
pleasure. Thanks
deeply
for having
appreciate this.
me.
As much as possible, I will stay in touch. We plan to have the Diary of a
Yes.
CMO as a physical event, both in SA and
Right.
in Lagos and Nigeria as well. We are having conversations with some global brands who want to make entry
Right.
into the African market. So I will be in touch as well when these kinds of things start to unfold. But thank you very much. Thank you so
Right.
much. Enjoy the rest of your
True
evening.
pleasure. True pleasure. Thank you so much for having me. I will go and conclude my listening of the rest of the prior podcast. Cheers and best wishes.
Thank you so much. Bye bye.
Take care. Blessings. Cheers.